poem is called One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. Now, this is a villanelle, so if you put this poem right next to the Dylan Thomas poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, you'll see some of these same, the repetitions that make the villanelle, right? So if I highlight The Art of Losing Isn't Hard to Master, and then I look down, I'm going to see either exactly the same thing or maybe a variation, right? So can you see it as I go down through here? And then at the end, right, close to the end, right? So that's line 1 and how it repeats throughout the poem. You see that in yellow, right? The third line, to be lost, that their loss is no disaster. I want to highlight that in a different color so we can actually see this, right? We're going to go with, they're all so bold, I'm not happy about them, so let's just do gray. This is going to repeat here, right? And then it's going to repeat here. But if you'll notice, compared to the Dylan Thomas poem, these are variations. So the line doesn't repeat exactly the way it was before. Okay, so let me read this, and you'll notice when the lines come back to us to echo, but also that they're variations, right? And that's because she's communicating something different with more or less the same phrase. In Dylan Thomas's poem, he was doing that very purposefully. In other words, using the exact same phrase, but the context and the lead in and maybe the comment out made them mean different things each time. In this case, Elizabeth Bishop is actually changing the words. She's not forcing herself to stick so closely, right? So let's do this. One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day. Accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love. I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. Okay, so one of the things she's doing is, like I said, meaning something different. But I think what we get a sense of in this poem is that she's talking to herself. And she's trying to convince herself. And she's telling herself that you can lose things and it's not the end of the world. It's not a disaster, right? But can you see how, especially in the last stanza, she can't seem to continue telling this lie to herself because her feelings, I think, are so intense that even if maybe there's some, intellectual truth to the idea that it's not the end of the world, that doesn't mean your emotions will agree with that, right? So if we go down through, one thing we're going to find is that she's losing smaller things, and then they keep getting bigger. So at first she says, lost door keys, the hour badly spent. And then losing farther, faster, she says, we have names, where it was you meant to travel. Then it says loved houses, so the things are getting bigger, and specifically they're things, right? The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities. Now those are bigger than houses, right? And vaster, some realms I owned. Realms, so we're not exactly sure what that means, right? But it says 2 rivers, a continent. And it gets up to some of the biggest things in the world, right? But then the last stanza, which she seems to acknowledge in this parenthetical remark, that she starts with something like a joke. And I don't know whether she's recognizing that the message she has for herself is a joke, because obviously it's unrealistic, or whether she's, because of the tension of the moment, using humor or going toward the humor. And then she has to tell herself that I can see you doing that, right? So it says a gesture I love. It says, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing is not too hard to master. Now, it didn't say isn't hard to master. It says not too hard, right? So That's a different thing. She's trying to tell herself that she can survive it, but I think maybe she doesn't feel like she can, right? So then we have the last line says, though it may look like, and then this is interesting, another parenthetical remark that says, write it with an exclamation point. Now that phrase then is what we call an imperative phrase, right? It's an order. And she's talking to herself, and she makes herself write something, but what it is, what is it that she has to write? In a sense, when you write something down, you've made it real, right? Now, what she has to say, of course, is the word disaster. But why does she have to say it? Well, one of the reasons is because she's trapped in this villanelle form. She knows she has to repeat a certain line, in this case would be line 3, and that ends with disaster, and she doesn't want to write that. She doesn't want to face it, right? So it's a very ironic poem in the sense that she is trying to tell herself that this is easy when I think her emotions are coming up to belie that point, right? So this was Elizabeth Bishop and the poem One Art. This